Eve Marie Carson was born on November 19, 1985, in Athens, Georgia, to Bob Carson and Teresa Bethke. From an early age, she demonstrated exceptional intelligence, compassion, and leadership. In high school, she was elected student body president, served as vice president of the Honor Society, and graduated as valedictorian from Clark Central High School in 2004. A dedicated volunteer, she spent time working at a safe house for abused and runaway teens, offering support and making a meaningful impact on their lives. After spending a semester at the University of Georgia, Eve transferred to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where she pursued a degree in political science and pre-medicine. As a student, she excelled academically, earning numerous honors and recognition as a Moorhead Kane Scholar. Her vibrant personality and dedication made her a natural leader and mentor. She served as an orientation counselor for incoming freshmen, ensuring new students felt welcomed and supported. Unfortunately, in early 2008, her life was unexpectedly cut short. On the night of March 4, 2008, Eve declined an invitation to go out with friends, choosing instead to stay home and focus on her studies. Tragically, this seemingly routine decision set the stage for a horrific crime. At approximately 3:38 a.m., while retrieving items from her car, Eve was abducted by 22-year-old Demario James Atwater and 17-year-old Lawrence Alvin Levitt Jr. The two men, both on probation for prior offenses, had driven to Chapel Hill with the intent to commit a robbery. Spotting Eve through her apartment window, they selected her as their target. At gunpoint, Eve was forced into her own vehicle and driven to a nearby ATM, where her kidnappers withdrew over $1,400 from her account. Surveillance footage captured Levitt's face and showed Eve praying in the back seat. Despite her attempts to plead with them and appeal to their humanity, her captors made the ruthless decision to kill her to eliminate any witnesses. They drove Eve to a secluded neighborhood where they shot her multiple times. Despite her severe injuries, she was still alive, prompting her attackers to deliver a final, fatal shot with a sawed-off shotgun. They then fled the scene, leaving her body at an intersection where it was ultimately found. The crime sent shockwaves through the Chapel Hill community and beyond. Investigators swiftly examined ATM footage of the suspects and launched an intensive manhunt. Levitt later confided in a friend about the murder, leading to his and Atwater's arrest on March 12, 2008. Both were charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, robbery, and related offenses. They were convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Eve's tragic death was an immense loss to her family, friends, and the UNC community. In recognition of her impact, she was posthumously awarded the Chancellor's Award for Most Outstanding Woman in the senior class and the General Alumni Association's Distinguished Young Alumnus Award. Her legacy continues through the Eve Carson Scholarship, which supports students who exemplify her values of leadership, service, and academic excellence. Jasmine Nicole Pace, who went by Jazzy, was born on May 29, 2000 in Chattanooga, Tennessee, to parents Katrina Bean and Travis Pace. Jasmine was a bright and vivacious young woman. At just 22 years old, she remained in Chattanooga, close to her family and friends, but was unfortunately dating a student at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, named Jason Chen. On November 22, 2022, Jasmine experienced the loss of her great-grandmother, who had been rushed to the hospital and passed away. Overwhelmed with grief, she went to Chen's apartment at the Lofts at Tremont to decompress. She then failed to return home that night, prompting her family to report her missing. During that time, they continued receiving text messages from her phone saying she would call them later, but they didn't believe it was her using the phone. Her family tracked her 2021 Chevrolet Equinox and found it abandoned near Signal View condominiums on Mountain Creek Road, about 10 minutes from Chen's apartment. Surveillance footage later revealed that her car had been driven into the parking lot, but they couldn't identify the driver. For days, Jasmine's family and law enforcement searched tirelessly. On December 1st, 2022, their worst fears were confirmed. Jasmine's body was discovered handcuffed and stuffed inside a suitcase near Suck Creek Road. She had been deceased for over a week and had been stabbed over 60 times. The brutality of her murder shocked the community, and suspicion quickly fell on Jason Chin. As investigators delved into the case, they uncovered chilling evidence. A search of Chin's family home in Nolensville, Tennessee, revealed sticky notes meticulously documenting Jasmine's personal history and their relationship timeline. These notes painted a disturbing picture of Chin's obsession. Investigators had also found surveillance footage from a Walmart in Red Bank, Tennessee, that showed him purchasing items that were linked to the murder. They also found surveillance footage of him buying items from a Walgreens. On November 27, 2022, investigators executed a warrant on Chin's apartment and discovered blood in multiple locations. They also found Jasmine's ID, her credit cards, and her pants. A neighbor of Chin's came forward and reported being woken up by a loud scream around 2 a.m. on the night she disappeared. She said the scream sounded like someone in distress. She thought about calling 911, but after the scream, she heard footsteps and a door slam and figured it was two people arguing and the argument was over. However, after hearing the news of Jasmine, she knew she had to tell investigators what she had heard. A timeline was then put together of the night Jasmine was murdered. She arrived at Chin's apartment at 11:42 p.m. on November 22, 2022. At 2 a.m., the neighbor is awoken by screams. At 2:18 a.m., Jasmine's phone pings her mother's phone. At 9:52 a.m., Chin messaged someone on Tinder who he had been talking to and said, and I quote, "So I guess we're dating now." At 10:40 a.m., he arrived at Walmart where he bought cleaning supplies. At the end of the investigation, they determined that Chin had stabbed Jasmine over 60 times in the early hours of November 23rd. He was then arrested and charged with first-degree, premeditated murder and abuse of a corpse. They were never able to get a clear motive, but they believe Jasmine caught him communicating with other women, and she confronted him about it. Regardless, in the end, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Rakim Hasheem Allen was born on December 9, 1991, and rose to fame as a talented rapper, singer, and songwriter known as PnB Rock. Before his musical success, Rakim made some bad decisions. At the age of 19, he was sentenced to 33 months in prison for drug possession and other offenses. While incarcerated, he got his life back on track, and in 2014, he released his debut mixtape, which gained industry attention. By 2015, he had signed a record deal with Atlantic Records, leading to a series of successful projects, including his hit single, Selfish, which peaked at number 51 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. His final single, Love Me Again, was independently released on September 2, 2022. 10 days later, Rakim's life was tragically cut short. While dining with his girlfriend at Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles in Los Angeles, an armed individual entered the restaurant and demanded his jewelry. The assailant then shot Rakim in the chest and twice in the back before fleeing with his possessions. Harrowing footage showed Rakim lying on the ground, bleeding, as bystanders called for help. Despite efforts to save him, he succumbed to his injuries. Investigations revealed that the murder was orchestrated by Freddie Lee Trone, who instructed his 17-year-old son to rob and kill Rakim. Surveillance footage placed Trone in the parking lot of the restaurant approximately 30 minutes before the murder. He was informed of Rakim's presence at the restaurants by Tremont Jones, who was later convicted of 2 counts of robbery and 1 count of conspiracy for his involvement and sentenced to 12 years in prison. As for Trone, he was arrested and charged with 1 count of murder, 2 counts of robbery, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit robbery. Interestingly, during the trial, he described the murder as heinous and denied direct involvement. He also called his son, who pulled the trigger, a dangerous individual. The jury didn't buy it, and he was found guilty and sentenced to 31 years to life in prison. As for his 17-year-old son, whose name has not been released to the public, he was also charged with murder, but is currently being held in a juvenile detention center and is undergoing mental competency tests to determine if he is fit to stand trial. Trone's wife, Chantel Trone, was charged as an accessory after the fact. She pleaded no contest in July 2024 and was scheduled to be sentenced on January 16, 2025, though details of her sentencing remain unclear. As for a motive, it appears it was simply Rakim's jewelry, which was estimated to be worth around $500,000. Ruth Avis Buchanan was born on October 15, 1937, in Sulphur Springs Township, North Carolina. At 52 years old, Ruth was a vibrant woman living in Forest City, North Carolina. She cherished her family, including her 2 children and her husband, and had a passion for square dancing. Known for her kindness, Ruth enjoyed giving back to her community. On December 29th, she traveled to Uptown Charlotte with a friend to enjoy post-Christmas sales. The day took a tragic turn as Ruth and her friend walked alongside the sidewalk near the intersection of 5th Street and North Tryon Street. At around 4 p.m., Ruth was crossing the intersection when a dark-colored sedan ran a red light and struck her. The driver fled the scene without stopping to help, leaving Ruth gravely injured. She was rushed to Charlotte Memorial Hospital, where medical staff worked tirelessly to save her, but unfortunately, the following afternoon, she succumbed to her injuries. Witnesses at the scene provided descriptions of the vehicle and its license plate number, sparking initial hope for a quick resolution. However, investigators soon discovered that the license plate had been stolen from a Mercedes unrelated to the incident. Days later, police located a dark blue 1990 Mitsubishi Galant abandoned at a Charlotte hotel. The car had the stolen license plate and was identified as the vehicle involved in the crash. Crime scene search technicians processed the Mitsubishi, collecting several pieces of evidence, including a marijuana joint left inside a canister. Despite these leads, the case went unsolved for decades. In 2022, Crime Stoppers received a tip regarding Ruth's case, and while the tip itself was not credible, it did reignite the investigation. Investigators sent the joint collected from the car to CMPD for DNA analysis. From there, investigators were able to identify the suspect as 68-year-old Herbert Stanback, who was serving a 22-year sentence at the Scotland Correction Institution in Laurinburg, North Carolina, for an unrelated crime. Detectives discovered that Stanback had been on a work release program from prison at the time of the crash, working at a nearby hotel. They determined he had struck Ruth as he was leaving work on December 29, 1989. On March 20, 2024, detectives traveled to Laurinburg to interview Stanback. Initially hesitant, Stanback asked for time to reflect and then later confessed to being the driver of the vehicle. His 26-minute confession provided investigators with the final pieces needed to pursue charges. An arrest warrant was obtained, and Stanback was charged with felony hit and run, resulting in serious injury or death. Many, including Ruth's family, believed Stanback should have faced more severe charges, such as vehicular homicide, given the reckless behavior leading to the crash. His actions, speeding, driving a stolen car, potential drug use, and fleeing the scene, painted a picture of gross negligence. In June 2024, Stanback was transported to Mecklenburg County and formally charged for his role in Ruth's death. The advancements in forensic technology and the relentless efforts of law enforcement finally brought long-awaited answers to Ruth's family after nearly 35 years. Susan Leigh Wolfe was born to Thomas and Patricia on January 13, 1954, in Washington, D.C. During her senior year of high school at Reagan High in Austin, Texas, she began volunteering at the state hospital and became interested in medical work. In early 1980, 25-year-old Susan had been working the last 6 years at the Austin State Hospital and was currently on the night shift as a mental health aide. She was also preparing to begin nursing studies at the University of Texas, but would sadly never get the chance. Susan was known for walking or riding her bike to and from work at the hospital. During that time, she never voiced any concern or fear despite the poor lighting in the area just east of Guadalupe Street. On January 9, 1980, Susan had her home treated for pests. Because of the fumes, she had plans to spend the night with a neighbor. At about 10:45 p.m., she began walking to the friend's house when witnesses reported seeing a car pull up next to her with two men inside. Quickly, one of the men jumped out and began forcing her inside the 1970 Dodge Polara. The next morning, Susan's partially clothed and bruised body was discovered in an alley at 2000 East 17th Street in Austin. She had been strangled, sexually assaulted, and fatally shot in the head. Nearby was the bag of clothes she had been carrying. Her roommate, Robert Scasher, a nurse with a master's degree in music, quickly became a person of interest and was questioned by police for hours. However, they could find no physical evidence to tie him to the crime. Despite extensive efforts, including interviews with over 40 persons of interest and multiple suspects, the case went unsolved for 44 years. In April 2023, Austin Police Department detectives revisited the case and had the DNA evidence from the sexual assault kit submitted to the Texas Department of Public Safety Crime Laboratory. The DNA was then uploaded to CODIS and matched to 78-year-old Deck Brewer, Jr., who was already incarcerated in Massachusetts on unrelated charges. A DNA sample obtained from Brewer in June 2024 confirmed the match. During questioning, Brewer admitted he had been in Austin and San Antonio around the time of Susan's death, but lawyered up when confronted with the DNA evidence. On August 14, 2024, Brewer was arrested and charged with Susan's murder, and as of February 2025, he is still in custody awaiting trial.